thank you for this presentation. I want to thank for all the organizer for inviting me at this important congress, and especially Dr. Chavez for his splendid, marvelous hospitality. Transhumanism has gained public visibility recently after several official reports from the US and the European Union. The best known is the US report Converging Technologies for Improving Human Performance, Nanotechnology, Biotechnology, Information Technology, and Cognitive Science, 2002. It clearly promotes research and development policy of human enhancement, and it has provoked some reactions from the European Union. So, in 2004, the report Convergent Technologies for the European Knowledge Society opposes explicitly the transhumanist agenda. In 2009, a report from the European Parliament titled Human Enhancement describes at length the transhumanist trend and concludes that transhumanism must be taken seriously. I quote, "Although many of the transhumanist visions have a smack of science fiction, they have managed to gain considerable ground in the ethico-political debate on human enhancement, as well as a rather widespread attention in diverse academic fields and in the media." Transhumanism refers to a nebula of ideas where serious arguments are neighboring with fantasy. It is not difficult to select text and statements to discredit it. My approach is constructive, for I think transhumanism is worth attention. It provides the possibility to articulate in a coherent way a wide range of ideas and issues, anthropological, epistemological, ethical, political, and even ontological, scattered over bioethical debates. This was already undertaken in the late 90s with the creation of the World Transhumanist Association. Texts produced as part of this association, renamed Humanity Plus in 2008, however, does not exhaust the relevant references for philosophical development of transhumanism. Through the question, is transhumanism humanism, I will try to illustrate some aspect of this. First, let us recall that transhumanism situates itself in the wake of the Enlightenment, especially Condorcet. But the historical reference that militates most in favor of a humanistic vision of transhumanism is Julian Huxley. In 1957, Huxley coins the word transhumanism as a synonym for what he had called long before evolutionary humanism. His project was to build an ideology capable of integrating science and technology and victoriously stand comparison with traditional religions. Biological evolution that has produced the human species is the central hypothesis. But the central concern is the future of the human species placed in the perspective of the coming evolution that men must now take charge of. Huxley rejects reductionist materialism and spiritualism. He attaches great importance to the activities and products of the mind, but these mental productions, culture, ethics, art, science, etc., come from man who himself is part of nature. Humanism, according to Huxley, must be naturalistic, opposed to any supernature, monistic, opposed to any dualism, and evolutionary, opposed to statism. Humanism, naturalism, monism, and evolutionism thus characterize transhumanism and clarify its introduction in the last lines of the text Transhumanism from 1957, often quoted, and I quote 3 lines of it: "The human species can, if it wishes, transcend itself. We need a name for this new belief. Perhaps transhumanism will serve, man remaining man, but transcending himself by realizing new possibilities of and for his human nature." End of quotation of Julian Huxley. The vast majority of transhumanists are agnostics or atheists, secular and free thinkers. Values and declared intentions are close to modern progressive secular humanism. It is true that Julian Huxley introduced transhumanism as an ideology with the weight of a religion without dogma, but current transhumanism avoids most often to show similar ambition. It focuses more modestly around the notion of physical, cognitive, and emotional enhancement, and it advocates a method of case-by-case assessment of the proposals and potential improvements, as happens in bioethics committees. Transhumanism, as an optimistic faith, voluntarist and rationalist in the future, in human creativity and responsibility, it rejects fanaticism, intolerance, superstition, and dogmatism. Transhumanism distances itself from traditional and modern humanism by relativizing the exclusive value given to human being as member of a biological species. It denounces human speciesism. The specific human biological form is not sacred. It is not immutable and does not have a monopoly of respect and dignity. Transhumanists prefer the notion of person defined by the presence of certain attributes, awareness, sensitivity, the ability to reason and choose, etc. What separates man from other living beings is not absolute difference, but a matter of degree. Animals may share to some degree characters of a person. These observations also apply to entities, trans or post-human, speculative today, who could share some attributes of the person. Transhumanism asserts that all sentient beings, possibly conscious, pre-human, non-human animals, or post-human, are entitled to a moral status respectful of their well-being and flourishing. The emphasis on the concept of person also denounces the value, judgments, and discriminations associated with differences of race or ethnicity, sex, gender. One of the criticisms addressed to modern humanism is that it has privileged the figure of the white male Western man. Transhumanism is post-humanist in the sense that it dismisses these prejudices of humanism. At the core of transhumanist values is the autonomy of the person, also free to modify his or her body. This fundamental right includes the freedom of procreative choices. Transhumanism is opposed to any totalitarian politics disrespectful of individual and parental autonomy. Transhumanism is materialistic, if this means it opposes dualism and spiritualist substantialism, but this materialism does not define the essence of matter. Matter is both mechanical and alive, substance and energy, thinking and conscious, infinitesimal and immense. Such materialism is not, contrary to what is often said, reducing or simplistic. Rather, it is multiplying. The tools of this multiplication are the technosciences, including those I started mentioning, the NBIC. This operative materialism does not seem incompatible with Huxley's monism. Material technologies applicable to humans are quite central to transhumanism. Their importance is a major difference between transhumanism and traditional humanisms, including modern secular humanism. Humanism sees the progress first or exclusively in terms of social transformations, institutional, symbolic organization, education, ethics, law, culture, policy, without deep biophysical changes in humans. Humanism, even modern and secular, has no ambition to fundamentally change human nature and its limits. Transhumanism is characterized by a willingness to fight effectively against finitude and death. It points out that many technoscientific research is going on in the field of aging and longevity in animals and humans. Religions and philosophies have never ceased to justify death as long as it was a foregone conclusion against which there was actually nothing to do. This situation has started to change. Transhumanism encourages this evolution while leaving each individual free to celebrate finitude or the fiction of a supernatural life after death. However, from now on, religions and philosophies justifying or advocating finitude are negative forces that encourage inaction and fatalism. Transhumanism is humanism without a priori limits. The speculative and narrative reference of religious and secular humanisms was history. That of transhumanism is evolution. The 20th century has been described as the age of collapse of the grand narratives that gave meaning to history. Transhumanism is able to propose a new narrative but open to be written century after century with a rich speculative imagination and capable of integrating technoscientific revolutions. A story without religious or secular eschatology, nor terminal utopia, a story whose end cannot be anticipated and still bears an endless expectation and hope. The transhumanist grand narrative starts with a look back at the cosmic and biological evolution. It continues with human evolution considered from the technological angle. This chronicle of the human species described as having always been a technician species tells the story of mankind as a history of improvements due to techniques invented by humans: stone, language, writing, printing, agriculture, motors, industry, internet, NBICs, etc., etc. The assumption on which transhumanism bases the continuation of its grand narrative is that technological developments will continue and that the full potential of technologies will be gradually realized. But this optimistic scenario for the future is not the only possible one, and its implementation is not guaranteed. Nick Bostrom examines 4 possible futures. First, extinction. Its probability is high. 99% of terrestrial species eventually disappeared. Second, recurrent collapse. Catastrophic collapses of human civilization followed by restarts. Doubtful that this will last indefinitely. 3. Plateau. Stopping the biological, technological and social evolution, state of stagnation and balance maintained indefinitely. Also unlikely, especially as we move away in the future because of all the potential causes of instability or destabilization, internal and external, of the human species. 4. Post-human evolution with self-enhancement, transformation at infinitum. Bostrom believes that over the long run, the two most plausible assumptions are the first, extinction, and the last ones, posthuman evolution. The evolutionary transhumanist ground narrative, centered around the idea of enhancement, breaks with the exclusive dominance of the therapeutic paradigm as the assessment grid for biomedical innovations. Traditional and modern humanisms usually remain prisoners of the therapeutic paradigm and the prejudices associated with it, including the idea of an immutably given human nature. Evolutionism is a potentially dangerous paradigm. Transhumanism carries considerable risks related to equality, justice, and solidarity in a society of performance dominated by the market. These risks are sometimes underestimated by transhumanists. This concern can be read in some European reports I mentioned, as well as in some texts of the WTA. Risks and limitations of the perspective are linked to the immense complexity of the enterprise of technological improvement of individuals, given all what can go wrong on the short, medium, and long term in the field of physical and mental health and social relations. However, the risks will not be solved by less technology or a return to the past, but through more appropriate new technologies, freely accepted applications in the sense of physical, cognitive, and moral enhancements. Unlike humanism, transhumanism emphasizes evolution and material technologies. It compensates for the humanistic deficit about them. This rebalancing does not mean abandoning the ethical, social, symbolic acquisition of humanism, such as human rights. Solidarity, non-discrimination, justice are values to be preserved without immunizing them from technoscientific approaches, be it comparative ethology or genetics. Transhumanism calls for better balance between the symbolic and the technique. Nevertheless, the transformations envisaged by transhumanists could become so radical with unpredictable consequences that the anticipation of the future society and humanity is very limited and uncertain. An expression of these limits of transhumanist perspective is the posthumanist idea. Transformation could be so deep that the products of enhancement would be so removed from our human condition that we would have little or no relationship with them. If thanks to science, technology, and human values, we are not totally blind and devoid of light, this light is limited. Conclusion. Transhumanism is worth interest and does not imply a break with humanism. Of course, to promote enhancement and the right of individuals to freely use techniques for personal development and flourishing, you do not need a new grand narrative nor renewed vision of the place of human in the cosmos. Utilitarianism, liberalism, and pragmatism will do. Transhumanism, therefore, speaks primarily to those who, without rejecting these more classical philosophies, consider that they are not sufficient. Transhumanism offers something to answer to religion and metaphysics, which continue to play a huge role of legitimation, often implicit or even unconscious, in discussions and decisions for or against research proposals and innovations. Transhumanism is also has something to say in response to nihilism. It has the vacuum left by the retreat of the great religions and modern ideologies. Transhumanism encourages to confront the abyss of human condition in the technoscientific age, see the 4 scenarios of Bostrom, without seeking refuge in the symbolic shelters of religions and idealistic philosophy, nor sink into nihilism or dissolve into the postmodern. Transhumanism rationally and deliberately promote the expectation of self-transcendence of human race in the ocean of space and time, full of risk, dependent and independent of its own actions and abstentions. Is transhumanism a humanism? It may be, provided not to apply a restrictive definition of human and to pursue indefinite improvement with the greatest caution. Its significance is also critical. Transhumanism invites to dismiss prejudices and illusions attached to traditional and modern humanisms. Transhumanism is humanism capable of integrating technoscientific revolutions, past, present, and future, able also to cope with the indefinitely long time of evolution and not just the finalized temporality of history. Thank you.